Hey everyone, welcome back to Altengrad City in City Skylines. Today we have 3 projects in front of us. They will all be focused on completing the outer parts of the city closer to the main area. We will start by making a recently built district with modern villas and a bit more planned layout. Then we are going to finally build a football stadium slightly customized to fit the scale and the time period, and then we will take a look at the main train station some more because I want to build more industry around it and just generally wrap it up. So let's go do it. And we are going to start with that first project, and those are going to be the modern villas. So we are going to build them right on the side of this main road. It's going to be kind of like an extension of this main road. It already had the tram tracks, but I think that since I built it, I never put a tram line on it. So it's kind of a weird area because I was just building this back in the day with tram tracks, but I never really planned to do any kind of lines there. But I was always kind of thinking that there is going to be some residential area, in here, so the tram tracks are just going to be needed because public transport will be quite necessary in that place. So that's exactly what we are doing today. It's not really going to be like a super high density area that I probably had in mind before, but we are on the edge of the city. At least I decided that this is going to be the edge of the city now. So, this is going to be like this now. So I'm basically trying to create like a very artificial looking road layout, at least in the center, but also do some kind of changes so it's not going to be looking all that orderly. But some kind of order is going to be definitely maintained there, which is going to be the main like a contrast factor between this place and all the rest of the areas around this. I was definitely taking some inspiration from real life, from these kinds of villa areas. So we are basically creating like a main, I'm not really sure how to call it, like a boulevard maybe, not really because it's not going to be that big, that long, but some kind of a, maybe even like a central square, let's call it, or a central park. It's going to have these one-way roads even for one-way tracks, even for the trams and cars on the sides. In the center, there's just going to be green with some, flowers, trees. And on the sides, there's going to be just the buildings lining the sides of those roads. So the line that I'm going to put here is actually going to be, I think, some kind of a line that was eventually aiming completely somewhere else, but I decided to just end it over here. I'm not really sure how many terminus stations we have currently in the city. There's going to be actually 2 more, that one of them we're going to build today, and one in the next episode. So I'm a bit confused right now as to how many terminus stations we have, how many lines we have in the city, but I will probably have to figure it out later. In the previous episode, definitely. So I don't exactly remember which line is going to go into this place. I suspect that the line that will go here into this new area is actually cutting through the rest of the city and goes into that outskirts train station. That's the train station where we originated from for that first tram ride, right? So that's probably the one. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. The point is that there's going to be a tram line just ending in this new area. So back to the layout. Then I decided to just create these somewhat orderly blocks. They don't have these rows completely parallel to each other because I never really wanted to do that. So they are slightly angled towards each other, just a couple of degrees, just to have something more interesting. And it's all kind of enclosed in these more naturally just twisting roads in this area. So I kind of wanted to have some order in this place, but not really. I think that I managed to kind of do that feeling. Now, I'm just going to populate this area with, I think these are 2 packs of buildings, or maybe just 1 pack, I'm not sure. But I think they are called Art Deco buildings. I'm not exactly sure. I think they are called Art Deco buildings. I think I already used that 1-floor building already as some kind of like a guard booth on the side of that hotel that we did like 2 episodes or 1 episode back, something like that, right? So yeah, that's exactly the pack. The buildings look very similar, so that's ideal for this area because that was the main goal. Now, I had to convert all those, well, I didn't need to, but I did convert these buildings into procedural objects because I just really quickly wanted to get rid of all the details around them, all the props, and I definitely wanted to have these buildings a lot cleaner around them because they are very new. All of these buildings were built in the previous like 5-10 years, so they are very, very recently built. And I was thinking that they are also going to be very clean in the backyards, and just the fences are going to be very uniform, and everything is going to be just looking fresh, because it is in this time period. So I'm only going to be using very low trees inside the backyards, and not really going to go all that crazy with the detailing. It's going to look very, very artificial. Maybe as we progress in time, I'm going to revisit these yards, and I'm just going to do some kind of different detailing, larger trees, or something like that. But right now, all of these buildings are, first of all, very bright, very, very white, because all of these facades are very new, and all of these trees are going to be very short. Okay, so that's basically it. I'm also not really going to just overdo it that much with this kind of detailing with the decals or something, because it's supposed to be kind of uniform and, again, kind of new. So this is kind of suiting my level of detail that I'm kind of prepared on doing in this area. Anyway, I was also putting, because I converted all of these buildings into procedural objects, I was also putting those... I never remember if they're called cubes or blocks. I think they're called blocks, right? Block services, but in this case, the residential blocks. So there are actually people going to be living in these buildings, or in those blocks. And most importantly, there's going to be some traffic going into the area, some foot traffic, as well as car traffic, but mostly the foot traffic from the public transport. Now, you probably don't really see this too well in the video, but I'm also doing the custom wires everywhere in this district, by the way, because I was not really satisfied with the catenaries. I really wanted in this place to have much cleaner and slimmer catenaries, not really all that hard on the eye. So I was just using the PEVEX's masts, which are just on the one side of the street, and much thinner as well. And I was also using the PEVEX's wires in here, because they are just fitting this place much, much more. I was also playing a lot with the node controller, as you could have seen in the beginning of the layout in here on that turn. So I made sure that the trams are actually having like a very nice circle on top of this hill. And then I put that, I think, Croatian church on the top, which is actually looking kind of old, but even in real life, it was built quite recently. So that was actually a nice touch. And that church is not oriented to the east, which is actually something that I found is realistic. When you had these kinds of 1920s, 30s, like Art Deco residential area, villa areas, then the church was respecting the layout and not the sides, east and west. So that's actually kind of interesting. I really wanted to do that in the city. Now, that is done, and we are going to move to building the football stadium. Or, well, I'm not really sure if I should call it a stadium. It's kind of going to be a stadium in this time period, but obviously for today's standards, it's going to be quite small. Now, I downloaded a couple of these fields or surfaces, and I wasn't really sure how they are like scaled, but I think that with the rulers, I created like a 100 by something distances, so I could just scale with procedural objects some of these fields that I liked, so that the scale is going to be roughly realistic. I know that there are like different options for football fields in real life, depending on the championships and whatever countries, I suppose. But I just wanted to roughly get it done, because I know that there are stadiums in the workshop, or just fields that are just not scaled properly, because the authors just decided that it's going to be much better fitting for the game to have them smaller. So I suppose that was the case for some of these fields, but they were already kind of large. But I just scaled them up anyway, because I just kind of want to fill larger area. So that's also like one thing to consider. Now, as you can see, the football stadium is not really super close to that villa area, but it's definitely on that another main road, which is going to have the trams. Now, this road with the trams also didn't have a line, and for this one, I'm going to create a completely new line. This one is going to be very short. It's going to be going from that cemetery area. That's the place where we ended with that first tram ride video. And it's going to go to a new tram loop that I'm going to build in just a couple of minutes here. I already kind of had it there, but well, yeah, I actually did have it there as a temporary loop because it was serving another line, but that's not really important right now. So it's obviously important that some public transport is going to go to the stadium, and since we are, kind of doing trams all around the city, it obviously makes sense that trams are going to go here as well. So this is a perfect place for it. It's kind of on the edge of the city. It has the public transport. It nicely fits between the blocks. It has some modern buildings around it already. So absolutely perfect spot for it in the entire city. Now, I'm definitely using procedural objects for all these kinds of places, all the buildings around, all the viewing areas around the stadium, because I wasn't really satisfied with the scale of the existing stadiums. They were either just some kind of like little town fields or something, and there was nothing in between, right? But for the 1930s, I definitely wanted to create something like scale-wise or capacity-wise, something between the modern stadiums, big ones, and the small fields, right? So I just used procedural objects and added some of the buildings, some of the viewing areas, the sitting areas around it. I definitely didn't want to put the roofs over the entire place. I was thinking that the stadium definitely was smaller when it first got built, and then it was just gradually expanded with more viewing areas, more roofs, as people were complaining more about not being covered, and these kinds of things. I was taking some inspiration from real life, but it was a bit difficult to get it right exactly as I saw it in real life. First of all, I only saw black and white pictures, so I wasn't really sure about the colors. I definitely saw that a lot of these stadiums in this time period had the wooden fences around it, and they were absolutely crowded. Like every time there was a match, quite obviously, because it was pretty much the only event in the city on a Sunday afternoon, probably, or something like that. So there were people just all around it. I'm going to put all kinds of event markers around the stadium to kind of make it look like the match is about to happen or the stadium is about to open, something like that. And I'm also making the stadium so that it's on the side of some kind of a hill, because it was also kind of common when I was doing the research to see the stadium, and it had some kind of like a open space around it, like a green fields, and people were just sitting there, outside of the stadium technically, but just watching the match. So I really wanted to replicate that kind of I'm probably not going to do that right now, but in the time lapse, I'm definitely going to revisit the landscaping. I'm going to do something like that. And, as we're going to progress in time, the stadium is probably going to become much bigger, or maybe not. Maybe it's just going to stay the way it is. Maybe it's going to get abandoned. Maybe another stadium is going to pop up somewhere with higher capacity. Who knows? But right now, this is perfectly, suitable. I'm even satisfied with the color of the surface and everything. So overall, it's looking okay. I had to use procedural objects to detail in some entrances. Again, no idea how entrances looked like back in the day. No idea how even tickets were sold back in the day. If actually every single person had to go through some kind of a ticket booth to buy a ticket, I have no idea. They definitely didn't have those kinds of like electronic thingies that we have today, right? So not really sure about that. I only saw pictures of the actual entrances. Again, they were looking kind of scuffed, kind of like just wooden shacks, wooden gates in front of the actual stadiums. So that's kind of what I did. I used procedural object version of the park entrance. I just used the roof, and then I used the booths, the guard booths or something, and just did like a closed wooden gate, right? Because I don't really have like football players, animated football players. So we're just going to have it in a state where there is no match and people are just waiting outside of the stadium. Like I said, maybe waiting for it to be opened or something like that. But anyway, I think it's kind of fine to have it like that. Anyway, now when I was explaining that, I also started doing like a slightly modern district on the side, well, kind of like on the continuation of this main road from the city, another main road. So I just placed a couple of those modern buildings, and then I just filled that with lots of low density all around it. Nothing all that special, just to really expand the area. But I definitely wanted to have that already defined because it's kind of going to be important to finish the outside of the stadium and also to just have a better idea about just, wrapping it up in here. Also wrapping up the train station, which is exactly what we are going to do today. So from the last episode, we had some kind of things, some remnants to still finish. So for example, adding something on the side of that train yard. So that's exactly what I did. I kind of expanded even the rails, as you could have seen, just made them go into the buildings, into the factories, because that kind of looks nice. I really wanted to have that some more. And we also need to do some kind of expansion on the other side of this main road. Because we also have an industrial area in here. So if you take a look at the employment, or rather unemployment of the city, or demand for the city as a whole, then we definitely have a lot of demand for jobs, because I'm mostly doing residential buildings in the center. Makes sense because it's all like residential blocks. They would be in real life some kind of like little factories, little businesses in the backyards or something. But it's kind of difficult to do that in City Skylines unless I was doing the block service buildings, just like a office building just placed inside residential buildings, kind of mixed zoning, artificial mixed zoning. But I wasn't doing that from the start. I only recently started doing that, and it was just not enough to fill the demand. So we kind of do need to think about these things and do some more industry. It's definitely not going to cut it with just this single block here, but it's something. And I think in Altengrad in particular, I'm kind of okay with not really satisfying the entire demand of the city, because we are going to be expanding the city some more in the future. We're going to be adding some more factories as the time progresses, but also some residential areas. So it's kind of going to be difficult to get it right. But I think the city is kind of scaled okay. It's just that in City Skylines, it doesn't really have the realistic workplace counts of the buildings and something like that. For example, right here, I'm trying to create like a old manufacturing area, something like that, but it's not really going to have any meaningful amount of workplaces in the game. But obviously in real life, it would be a bit different situation. But anyway, enough about that, enough ranting about that. What am I building here? So I'm basically trying to just wrap up this part of the city with some kind of residential blocks, some kind of roads leading away from the city. And I was also thinking about how could I change this going forward, going into the future, because I know it's not really natural to do it that way, but I kind of am trying to create some interesting opportunities for later. So I was trying to put some kind of really old-looking blocks, and they were not exactly aligned with the geometry of the layout. You can clearly see it in these shots, and they are actually in the way of that main road. So who knows what's going to happen to those buildings, right, in the future when we're going to try to create some 50-lane highways through the area or something like that. But well, I'm just trying to create the opportunities here. I'm not really saying that I'm going to get rid of these buildings, but who knows? I'm just trying to keep the options open. So I'm just going to detail these places very lightly, mostly with decals and trees, because trees are just going to make everything so much better. And doing lots of these low density blocks here and there. As I explained many times before, I'm not going to do Altengrad all that realistic when it comes to the suburbs. In real life, there would be the suburbs much bigger, even in this time period, definitely even going forward. But, I just don't like doing them. So that's basically all the justification that I'm going to provide. So I'm just going to fill the edges of the map with farms mostly, and that's going to be it. By the way, farms is exactly what I was doing right there. I was mostly skipping through that in the time lapse because, we saw it many times before already. So no point showing that too much, but it's kind of important to see that it's been built. And obviously, that's the main thing that needs to be done outside of the city, just to fill the map with something. Now, we're going to return even to the stadium area and going to finally do some kind of detailing. So I'm definitely trying to close off the stadium area some more, but there are a couple of places open where people could be just, standing around outside the stadium and just watching the match if they really wanted to. I finally decided not to really do like huge open areas around the stadium, but only keep some of them. I also made this entrance area slightly smaller so that there could be a bigger like a plaza in front of it for people to just gather around, which is again something that I just saw from the research that I did. And this is definitely going to turn out looking good when I'm just going to create this place where people can gather before the stadium opens for the match. I'm also going to finish some of these blocks that I left open. I finally decided to start using, by the way, I have pretty much exactly the same issues in Altengrad and Aurelia. I'm just recycling buildings these days because I already built everything, right? And in Altengrad, it's not really that big of a deal because most of these buildings are these kinds of row buildings, but still, I kind of do want to, have certain different styles every now and then. So I decided to place those 50s row buildings in there, which is not really time period specific, but the buildings look just exactly as I thought the 30s buildings might look like. And I think I was actually doing this on the live stream, and we had a very, very lengthy segment where I was just taking a look at 1938 maps from Prague, and we were just doing like a research of buildings, what were built or which kind of buildings were built in that time period and where and how in regards to layout and everything. And those 50s buildings that I placed here in the city, they look exactly the same as the ones we have seen. So I think it's perfectly fine. Now, also, I was doing research when it comes to the progression of some of these places, like how were they built. And it was really interesting to see that in the 1930s, you had some really large neighborhoods, in Prague at least. I can't really speak for other cities. I haven't seen those. But you had these large planned layouts of roads, but the roads were not there yet. They were just some kind of like field gravel paths or something like dirt paths, just like I have in here. And it was really strange looking because the entire area, the entire district was not really built in like one project, one go. But I suppose that each individual building was kind of financed separately, probably built separately. And it was looking really strange because you had like a huge open space and suddenly a completely finished building in the middle of it. Without a road, without anything, just a building, like a row house in the middle of like a brown field, completely dirty and bad looking field. But there was like one building completely finished in the middle of it. And one by one, these buildings were just popping up all over the place, not really like orderly or anything. And it's actually the roads that were built last. So that's kind of interesting progression that we researched, and I was kind of trying to do that here, but only slightly. I was just trying to create like a very quick construction site for that one building. You could have seen me in the time lapse there just delete the building and instead of it place some kind of just dirt, some kind of future construction site and some kind of gravel roads all around it. But that area is probably going to become finished in the next time period, and more buildings are most probably going to pop up all around it. So that was really interesting to do that kind of research. Anyway, we're now going to do some last detailing around the train station. Also, I'm going to do the extension of the platforms of the passenger station, just like I said previously, and we're just going to do all kinds of decals in here, especially decals, and all these kinds of flowers, well, not really flowers, just some bushes, tall grass or something between the tracks, just so there's something there. I really like that kind of detailing. And I also put lots of trees on the side of that hill where the tracks are going into the tunnel, and also some landscaping. But we are going to see that hill in the next episode as well, because I do have some plans for it. Anyway, by doing this extension of the platforms, I'm also finishing today's project. So now we are going to take a look at the transition. As you can see, this place is actually really big, although it's not really fair because most of it, in this view at least, has been filled by the farms. But that's exactly what the farms are supposed to do. They are supposed to fill large areas to just complete the map, because otherwise it's just like empty green field without anything in it. So this is just a very quick way to fill that and be done with that part of the city, just like I explained many times before. Anyway, this is the finished villa district. As you can see, there are lots of people using the public transport, even using the cars, which is supposed to be this way. Obviously, rich people would be living here so that most of these houses would at least have one vehicle. So that's kind of nice. That's kind of nice seeing that. But just people walking on the sidewalks there is enough. It's really, really satisfying to see this place working, especially with the trams, how they are just picking up people and just, turning around on that circle up there. It's looking really good. I really, really like this view, how it turned out. Now, the next thing we did, obviously, was the stadium. So let's take a look at that. As you can see, there is that event generator right there next to the side entrance. The stadium has two entrances, I suppose, for home and visitors or something like that. Even though there's probably going to be matches in here from the same town or something, I'm not really sure how that would work. Obviously, all the people would go to the tram station, so they can have a fight in the tram if they wanted to. I don't know, but again, it's really satisfying how many people are just using the public transport in here. Look at that! Look at how many people just arrived by the tram. That is just great to see. Unfortunately, they were run over by that car, but nothing we can do about that. And the tram here, oh boy. Well, nothing we can do about that. But the event generator is really working wonders in here. This place, even though it's not really all that complicated, the stadium is just made from two different objects, really. It's okay. It's actually looking rather okay. There on the right side, you can see that small construction site with those modern buildings. I really liked how I managed to do on that intersection there. That's just going to go off the screen. I managed to do like a different time periods around the intersection. You have the industrial area, which might be 19th century, something like that. Then you have those slightly more modern row houses, maybe early 20th century, and then you have those very modern row buildings with the 1930s probably being built very recently. Well, yeah, definitely, because we have that construction site as well. This industrial area on its own turned out looking okay. It could have been probably larger now that I look at it, but now when I compare it to the rest of this train yard and the rest of the scale of this place, I think it's sufficient. Again, it kind of combines different time periods. The factory floor itself, the big one, where the trams or where the tracks are going into across the street, that's probably also something very recent. But then you have the smokestack there with all those old-looking buildings next to the street. So again, it might give you an idea that it was probably expanded over the period of some 100 years in the past. So yeah, that's just great. That's just looking okay in this area. Anyway, guys, next episode of Altengrad is going to be the last building episode in the 1930s. We're going to build a special project that I reserved for last, and with that project, we are completely going to finish the city. So definitely stay tuned for that. Thank you guys for watching today's episode. I hope you liked it. If you did, then you can always do the usual, which is definitely going to help the channel a lot. And that is, of course, putting a thumbs up below the video, leaving some comments, sharing the video, subscribing to the channel if you're new here. And you can also support the channel directly by becoming a channel member. Huge thanks to all the channel members that we have right now. I really do appreciate all your support, guys. Thank you so much. Anyway, that's all. Thank you again for watching. Take care and goodbye.